And our next session I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking through the technical side of choice and implementing Mac choice programs. I'm going to introduce your presenter in just a moment, but before I do, I just wanted to set up a little bit. We are going to have Q&A at the end. I'd like to ask everyone to hold your questions to the end. And then myself and my colleague, Chu, who's hanging out in the back, got his hand in the air, we will walk around and provide a microphone for you for questions, and I would just like to ask, don't shout the questions out. We're not going to be able to respond to questions that are just shouted. We will with the microphones, and we'll get through as many as we can. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Jamf Systems Engineer, Nick.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. I know it's day 3, it's the afternoon, it's right after lunch. I want to thank you for being here. It's really great to have the opportunity to talk to you all today. My name is Nick. I'm a systems engineer at Jamf, working out of our Amsterdam office. Now, Star Wars is something that's ingrained in Jamf from its very beginning. It's much loved by our founders, and I think pretty much everyone at Jamf is a Star Wars fan, including myself. But my work at Jamf is a bit more like Star Trek, boldly going to new and far territories on Jamf's mission to help organizations succeed with Apple. I cover a vast region, everything from Spain to India, down to South Africa, including the Middle East, so it definitely keeps me very busy. To give you a bit of background on myself, prior to working at Jamf, I was a teacher, and before that I worked in Apple retail. I'm really grateful at Jamf to have the opportunity to combine my passion and my love for Apple technology with my passion for teaching and my experience of deploying and managing devices. So why are we here? Well, I hope you read the schedule and you're in the correct room. I'm going to go ahead and put all the items up on the screen because despite common belief, reading slides out loud is not the same as teaching. I'd like to take about half an hour of your time today to talk about choice and to get under the hood a little bit at some of the components that help define a successful choice program. Now, being a teacher, I've had it ingrained in me that every presentation should begin with a quote. And this is no different, whilst looking for a quote to begin this presentation, I looked everywhere. I researched online, I spoke to people I know, I read books, until I found it, the perfect quote. It's simple, it's powerful, effective, and I think it's right on point for what we're talking about today. And I was fortunate enough to find it from one of our greatest philosophers, Aladdin. And much like a Disney story, much like a Disney film, I'd like to just take a moment or two to tell you a story now. And this is the story of Emma. Now, Emma's starting a new job. And much like anyone starting a new job, she's nervous and excited. She's nervous because it's a new building full of new faces, but she's excited to start a new chapter in her life. In her previous role, working for a graphic design company, she had the opportunity of working on large name accounts, and she received recognition amongst her peers. She was very much liked. So why did she leave? Well, it was purely that she'd been offered a more senior role in another organization with the opportunity to travel. She'd always wanted to go to places such as Paris or even Hong Kong. On her last day, there were some tears from her colleagues, and there was flowers from her boss, and she was met by a guy called Tim. Now, Tim worked in the IT department, and he'd come to take back her phone and her laptop. And this got her thinking. She remembered years ago when she'd been given the device, she was really happy that they'd given her an iPhone and a MacBook. She already had one of each, but she was thrilled they were giving her the latest release. She remembered how it had a much better camera than her current one. And it even survived like a boat trip in one of those clear plastic bags. Even the MacBook, she remembered it had all of her photos on it, and she'd put a sticker on the front of Snoopy, which had sparked many conversations in boardrooms. But now the time had come to give it back to Tim and hand the hardware back. But then she started thinking about her new role. And that's because during the recruitment process, Emma had been asked if she would like to have a Mac or a PC. And clearly she'd chosen a Mac. Now I think you get where I'm going with this story. It's pretty much like Aladdin said, we should be free to make our own choice. But sadly, often, the case is very different. Well, more often than not, we see this one-size-fits-all approach, where the type of hardware that we work on day to day is chosen for us by the organization. And this could be down to any number of factors. This could be a legacy decision that was made some time ago. It could be a budget decision. It could be IT support or application support models. Myself, I've been fortunate enough throughout my career to date to have used a Mac all the way through. I think if I was suddenly given a Windows PC, I'd be completely lost. I can definitely install the Jamf Pro server on it, but I couldn't find my emails, I think. If you've been used to a particular platform throughout your education or your career to date, then why should you have to change? What works for one person may not work for another. Why should we all have to fit to the lowest common denominator? Now, the problem we face when trying to tackle this situation is that implementing choice can often be met with a certain amount of skepticism. Hurdles can come up, and it can be difficult to decide how best to overcome these. Now, usually it starts over things like TCO and price, but that's a whole other discussion, and I'd like to direct you towards the Jamf ROI executive brief, if that's what you're interested in. They can definitely help build out an ROI case study if you speak to one of your Jamf representatives. This is then, though, normally followed up by security concerns. What about having these devices on my network? What about having them connecting and accessing company resources? Then there's the more human argument of, oh yeah, in my role, I have applications that simply won't work on a Mac, and I need a PC to do my job. And that's fine. There's a solution and an answer to all of these questions and all of these concerns. And it's one that does three core things. It helps keep talent, it helps attract new talent, and it helps increase productivity. And it's called Choose Your Own Device. Back in 2016, at the JNUC, Fletcher presented us the IBM story, and I think it kind of blew everyone's minds. It was on a huge scale. And since then, I've been going from Spain to Israel, South Africa, and people keep asking me about the IBM story. And what comes up time and time again is how they say, but we're not on this scale. We're nowhere near as big as IBM. And that's fine. You don't have to be. There's so many lessons that can be learned. What we're witnessing is a massive shift towards choose your own device, and for good reason too. Even the soft benefits are compelling. If we look at things like attracting new talent, retaining talent, employee satisfaction, why wouldn't we want to improve in all areas of this within the business? And that's not to mention the hard benefits of proven cost reductions, reduced support costs, and a reduction in the time it takes to prepare, manage, and deploy these devices. There's an analogy I'm sure you're all aware of, and that's when you join an orchestra, they don't ask you to play a different instrument. So why wouldn't we all want the choice to continue to play the same instrument? Or change? It is a choice. To pick up on what Fletcher had said back in 2016, is to start with the why. Why do you want to do this? And that goes beyond just the hardware purchase. What is the long-term, deeper vision for the program? And that's a key word, program. It's important to see this as a program, not a project. And I'll say it again, it's a program, not a project. And you might be wondering why the definition? Well, a project implies that it's completed once it reaches some kind of predefined step, whereas a program is a much more ongoing, deeper vision. And like with any program, there are certain key steps along the way, and these don't guarantee success, but they definitely help to improve the odds. You can see much of what we see here is mirrored in what IBM did. You can see that we've started with a survey. It's important right off the bat to make sure there's interest in this across the organization. There's no point starting a program unless people are interested in it. I'd also like to add, it's worth talking to HR or hiring managers and see and ask them, do they ask like we saw with Emma? Do they get the choice of a Mac or a PC? What would you prefer to work on? If they don't ask these questions, then perhaps this is something they could do. Now, what's really crucial is executive buy-in. This can't all be driven from below. Otherwise, it's like trying to push a heavy rock up a steep hill. You need buy-in from all levels, from C-level to IT implementing this to the end users. What's also really crucial, I'd like to add, is to assign a program manager. This is something that IBM did, and it's really important to have someone to be able to drive this project internally, or program internally. This is where we see the greatest success. Having someone that understands the Mac and also the platform to manage it is really crucial. Now, I'm not going to talk, I could talk all day on a high level about choice programs, from executive buy-in to communication strategies. But what I'd like to do is to get under the hood and look at some key areas and look at what things can be practically implemented that have a real impact on the success of a choice program. Now, you may already have some Macs in your organization, and you may, I hope, are using Jamf to manage them. But these may be used by just a department or executives of a certain level. What practical, technical considerations must you take in order to go from that kind of setup to a full-blown user choice program for all? Well, I'd like to go through just a few of my top ones now. And it starts with the native experience. Protecting the native experience, and this is something that we do really well at Jamf, and it's definitely something I would encourage you to do. The reason someone has likely chosen a Mac is because they're aware of the native experience. Even if they're completely new to Mac or they're from Mac before, the native experience is likely something that is a key factor in the reason they chose to work on a Mac. Trying to directly mimic the Windows experience on a Mac to satisfy some sort of corporate compliance policies can often very impact on the very reason someone chose a Mac. More often than not, we can satisfy all of these corporate compliance rules. We just use a different methodology, and it allows us to preserve the native Mac experience. So often we find that many of the decisions about how these devices are managed currently don't fit into the model of how a user actually uses the device today. A choice program can often spark a conversation to review current practices that can actually benefit the end user and ultimately IT, who have to implement this and work more efficiently. Now this one, click through there. No. Having a returns policy. This is, I think, something that's very important, especially for that demographic of people that are new to Mac and are trying to decide if they want to work on one for their day-to-day work. Giving them a time frame in which they can return the device if necessary and change their mind can be really powerful. It can make them feel much more confident about making that choice. This is something that IBM did, and if you can do it, I would recommend that you do. You may be restricted by certain organizational policies, but if you can, I strongly recommend you review this. By allowing someone the time to change their mind and return the device, it can make them feel much more comfortable about making that choice. And if you look at the statistics, very, very few people return the device after the initial trial period. This comes up a lot. Application readiness reviews. So one of the big arguments that comes up is, oh yeah, but we've got loads of applications that simply won't work on a PC. Work on a Mac. We have to have PCs. And this may be true in some circumstances. I'm seeing nodding heads. I'm not here to tell you that you're 100% wrong. I'm also not here to build all of your apps to work on a Mac. I'm not going to do that. But again, this can often be a blessing in disguise. It can help us to review current applications that are supported and decide whether or not these are actually needed. More often than not, the most core applications that are needed for all departments and in most positions do work on a Mac. And for those that don't, there are options. If we again look back to what IBM and Fletcher presented a few years back, they had 3,000 applications in their current app catalog. 3,000. Out of those 3,000, there were 78 that had an issue that needed to be addressed. And out of those 78, there were 42 that required a workaround, such as virtualization. It's important to pick up any red flags early on in the process and measure the impact of those, but it's also really important to not let the perceived idea that applications won't work on a Mac prevent you from progressing with an employee choice program. Next up is the purchase portal. Now, this is something that IBM did again, and I've seen it done many other places since then. It directly feeds into a culture change aspect. The look, feel, and presentation of how the choice is presented to the end user is crucial. Having a well-structured choice portal where a user can go to decide the type of hardware that's available to them from the organization can be massive. The look, feel, presentation, it directly feeds into the perception of how it would be to use that device every day to work. Now, you may be thinking, well, yeah, I don't really have the time to build an employee choice portal. And naturally, with things as they are, that can fall by the wayside. Maybe you don't have the skills. That's fine. Apple has you covered. They've built something called the Employee Communications Kit. Now, this is a fantastic resource aimed at HR, IT, and PR teams to help understand how best to communicate a choice program. It walks you through how best to create awareness, but the best part is they've pre-built an employee choice portal. If you go to the email address that's up on the screen there, you can actually get all of the tooling from Apple to put in place an employee choice portal. How awesome is that? It's so much time saved, and you can have a fantastic-looking choice portal that has the look and feel as if it was designed by Apple, because it was designed by Apple. And if you'd like, you can go use that QR code, and that'll take you online directly to the PDF of the Employee Communications Kit from Apple. I'll give you just a moment to do that. And I'll warn you, that's not the last one of those you'll see if you want to keep your phones handy. I hope you can scan it from all the way back in the room. I tried to make it as big as possible. Yeah, all good, I'm seeing. Yeah, perfect. Okay, everyone got it? No? Never mind. The next thing I want to talk about is self-service. This is such a crucial part to any choice program. Now, I'd just like to ask, how many people here are currently using self-service? Could you put a hand up? Awesome, cool. Okay, could you put your hands up then if your self-service is either A, as well built out and as well thought out as it could be, or B, is used by everyone in the organization to the fullest? A or B? If your hand's up, that's fine. You've also saved yourself a step in an employee choice program rollout. But for the rest of us, I think it's really important to review your self-service. If you were to take self-service from where it is now and roll it out across the organization, is it serving the end users as best as it could? Now, we heard on Monday, I think 90% of customers are now using Jamf Pro version 10, which is great. If you're one of the 10%, I would say please upgrade to Jamf Pro version 10 because you can custom brand self-service and you can apply your corporate identity to it. Give it colorful icons, well thought out categories. Make it what your users need it to be. But self-service can be so much more than just delivering applications to users. If you're struggling for ways that you can use self-service to do more than just install applications, I'd like to direct you to my favorite presentation from the 2016 JNUC, which is actually 10 ways to make self-service a killer app by Paul Cowan from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. He goes well above and beyond just installing applications, and he uses self-service to actually improve IT workflows. Again, I'll leave that up there just for a moment for you. So really take the time to address your self-service, evaluate it, and make it what your users need it to be. Yeah, YouTube's going off now for everyone, isn't it? Yeah. We can all watch him. We can all watch Paul Cowan. That was a great presentation. So next up, I want to talk about the power of Jamf and. I think this is something that's maybe probably come up quite a lot. I hope you're all aware of what Jamf and is. For those that don't, it's basically the marketplace, marketplace.jamf.com. And this is where you can go to see the work of Charles Edge and the team listing all of the current integrations with Jamf. It's a really fast-moving space, so please keep an eye on it. Look at your current environment. What do you have at the moment? Do you have directory services, LDAP? Are you using SSO, SMTP? Are you using file shares? All of these things directly impact the user experience, so it's important to decide what you want to use in your environment for the end user. Perhaps you want to have them authenticate onto the Mac with a username and password coming from a directory service. Or not. Maybe local account's fine. Maybe you want a single sign-on experience. Maybe you want to leverage some kind of VPN. Maybe you want to have them authenticate onto the network and make sure that they're compliant. Talking of compliance, maybe you want compliance that you have on your Windows devices for Office on your Mac as well. Think about what you need and have a look at the marketplace. It will give you so many ideas. And actually, I'm going to take a look at just a couple of my favorite ones now. And one that's been crucial for the last number of years, with Apple Business Manager in particular, is the end user experience. Apple Business Manager and the deployment programs has given us this fantastic zero-touch experience for IT and a really streamlined onboarding experience for the end user. Now, there are certain community tools that came out that were put on the marketplace, such as DP Notify, that helped us to improve that experience for the end user. It solved a few of the issues that IT were facing and gave us a much more streamlined experience when it came to deploying these devices. Now, if you're wanting to think about ways to use DP Notify and other tools like this, then the best thing I can do is to point you towards the 2018 Jamf London Roadshow presentation by Sachin Palmer. So Sachin goes well above and beyond just just doing a standard deployment program. He actually plays a video to the end user during the DP process. I think that's a dollar in the jar now. I said DP. Damn. So he actually plays a video to the end user, one of their corporate videos, whilst notifying them of installs that are taking place in the background using Jamf. So he's laying down all the settings, application, and security that the device needs, whilst the user gets to sit and watch a really nice video. And I think he timed it rather well, because when the video ends, the user's on the desktop ready to go. So I direct you to look at his blog. It's a really fantastic presentation that he did. And the next one that comes a lot in choice programs is certificates. What happens when you want to deploy hardware to new users who aren't office-based? Traditionally, you'd have to be on the local network to either maybe bind or get local certificates in order to access company resources. I think we can see this woman here, she probably isn't office-based, but she might be accessing corporate resources. Essentially, what we need are happy users who don't see IT as a blocker, in order for them to be able to do their day-to-day work. But we also need for IT to have a streamlined method for onboarding these external devices. So through Jamf's integration with ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, this can be possible. So actually through Jamf, the device can make a certificate request to ADCS. This type of integration opens up amazing new experiences for the end user, being able to onboard into an organization whilst being external from the LAN. And it also gives IT an ability to maintain current security requirements for the organization. Now, ADCS is the most common certificate authority. If you're not using ADCS and you're using something else, then you can also have a look at things like the Jamf Get proxy to achieve this kind of external onboarding workflow. So something that's been the talk for a number of years now is Nomad or Jamf Connect. I think there's been quite a few presentations on it in the last couple of days. But many organizations wish to have their user authenticate onto the Mac using a corporate username and password. Something that's very easy on the PC side of things. It's never quite played nicely on the Mac. Mac playing in a Windows Server world using Windows technology, binding, it's never really worked quite so smoothly. Well, Jamf Connect, or previously Nomad, does a great job of achieving this, allowing the user to authenticate onto a Mac using a username and password from a directory service by avoiding the bind completely. It handles the Kerberos ticket and avoids having mobile accounts. It creates a really nice experience for the end user and actually really helps IT to achieve one of the simplest tasks, having people authenticate onto a device. Okay, so with a shift towards the cloud recently, we've seen a lot of people move from an on-premise Active Directory kind of setup to Azure AD. But Azure AD doesn't have the same native mappings that Active Directory had on-premise. We don't have this ability to bind. So what can we do? Well, we could have Jamf, as it does very well, manage a local account. Jamf Pro is fantastic when it comes to managing those local accounts. But if you want to preserve that single sign-on experience in terms of using a directory account to authenticate to the device, then I think we've seen over the last couple of days and from day one, Joel presenting the integration with Azure AD to achieve the same kind of workflow with Jamf Connect. But also, what about applications and resources? If you're using Azure AD, perhaps you're using Intune to manage Windows devices. Well, you've seen maybe in the last year and a half or so, something that comes up time and time again that people are always asking me is about Jamf's integration with Microsoft for conditional access for the Mac. This allows us to have the best of both worlds, Microsoft application authentication and Jamf Mac management. So maybe it's definitely something to consider. Now, the next one is something I really want to stress. And there's been a lot of talk recently about Apple dropping support for imaging the new hardware they're shipping and Mojave, it just doesn't allow for this kind of way to provision a device. And this is going to break a lot of old workflows, such as NetBoot and imaging, basically. So embrace the new technology from Apple. They've given us things such as the Erase install flag and the Start OS install flags. This gives us great new possibilities to be able to re-provision a device out in the field. So really try to embrace that new technology. And if you're wondering how best to use these, Jamf has a fantastic blog about how to reinstall a clean Mac OS with one button. I'll give you just a moment with that one. But more recently, in the last few weeks, the Pro Warehouse team in the Netherlands have actually built an application that leverages on these flags and goes a step further to actually check the system for the user so that they know whether they actually need to turn off things such as Find My Mac. I don't actually have the QR code up on the screen, but they're stood at the back of the room, so if you want to know more about it, you can definitely talk to them. What this creates is a fantastic zero-touch offboarding experience. Combining that with Apple Business Manager gives you the zero-touch onboarding experience, and you've got the whole life cycle of the device taken care of. The device can be out in the field, and IT never need to touch it. Now, my final thought, really, is ideas to keep the program alive. Now, IBM saved money and fed it back into the system. They fed the program with money they saved by building things such as a Genius Bar. This replicated the Apple experience, the consumer experience, inside IBM. So if you can implement something like a Genius Bar, I strongly recommend you look at it. But maybe this isn't something you can do, and maybe you need other ideas. But having ideas to keep the program fresh is fantastic for the end users. It could be as simple as having someone do a short workshop with members of their department to help them understand how they can better use the device in their day-to-day if they've switched to a Mac. Or you could deliver your devices to the end users in the Apple Store. Apple's done a great job of creating a fantastic experience when purchasing hardware. You could leverage on that and deliver your hardware to an end user in a store. Or you could do something like a lot of great companies do, and that's have a vending machine for Apple accessories. This is something we do at Jamf. But having ideas to keep the program alive keeps it not only fresh for the end users, but also for IT managing the devices. But my closing thought that I want everyone to take away is, and I want to conclude really by saying, is be a pioneer. Don't worry about what if, and think about why. In 10 years' time, people are going to be amused by the notion that choice was not offered sooner. It's going to become the accepted norm to offer a user the choice between a PC and a Mac. So why wait? You can start now. And being a teacher, I like to do takeaways. So my top 3 takeaways, really, is start asking. Talk to your employees, talk to hiring managers, do a survey. If Mac was offered as a choice, would you take a PC or a Mac? And also the magic ingredient, and that's having someone to drive the program. This is where we see the greatest success. Programs, by their very nature, have been an ongoing process. They can start and stop, they can rise and fall, but having someone that can own the program, that understands the Mac and understands the platform to manage it, to drive this internally, is where we see the greatest success. And I'd encourage you to tell them to look at the key areas I spoke about today. And finally, don't lose sight of why you're doing this. What are the key benefits to the employee, of employee choice to the users, to IT, and to the organization? And if you're interested in employee choice, then just ask us. There's plenty of people in the room from Apple to Jamf. If you'd like us to come to your organization and discuss employee choice further, you only have to ask. Thank you. And I think if there's any questions, they're going to run around with some microphones.
Please just put your hand in the air with any questions. We'll come along and bring a mic right to you.
Hammer him hard.
There's a lot of really good people in the room, as I mentioned. There's Apple in the room, there's Jamf in the room, there's partners and sponsors. So look around, there's plenty of people that can help as well.
Not a question, I just wanted to say that's a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, that's very kind, thank you.
So you'd mentioned the return
Yeah.
policy or the trial phase. What have you seen be successful in terms of giving like 7 days to try it, like have them keep it for a certain period of time? Or do you just say, if you don't want it, return within 7 days?
That's a challenging question. I'd say, how long's a piece of string? No, it's. I think what's acceptable for you, what's acceptable for the organization. Really decide on that. I think previously what we've seen is several weeks maybe to give them a chance to return it. But it can be powerful. Giving them that option to have an out if they need it makes them feel much more comfortable about that choice. I don't think there has to be an exact time frame on it. I don't think you want to leave it too long. I think months is definitely going to be too long. But yeah, maybe just a couple of weeks, I think, is what we've seen in the past. But it really depends on the organization. Yeah. I guess 2 microphones.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Jim.
Nice presentation. I got a question. So how long, what's the lifetime of a Mac within Jamf? So how many years?
Within Jamf? Well, we have a cycle of 3 years. So actually, I'm due to get a new one in January. I can't wait. I think my Apple Care runs out in January, so I get a new one in 3 years. iOS is different, but yeah, Mac, we're looking at 3 years. I think a lot of the TCOs are based on 4 years. But if you're interested, yeah, there's the ROI executive brief from Jamf, and we can help build that kind of, how that looks over the number of years, depending on what you want.
Right. And at the end of the cycle, do you get to buy it from the company, or?
No, they don't let me have it.
That's
They
unfortunate.
don't let me keep it, yeah. I think maybe having that kind of option, I know we saw that presented actually, I think on day one they were talking about that. Giving opportunity for people to buy hardware is great. So if anyone from Jamf watches this back later, yeah.
I think it's a good idea. Thanks.
No worries, thank you. Oh, Rich. Yeah.
So this talk was about the technical side, but can you comment on some of the soft side issues? Like, for example, for a choice program, it's good to get someone appointed to drive it. How do they get the clout to actually drive it through? Because it's one thing for the CIO to say, oh yeah, this person's in charge of our program.
Yeah.
But if that person has no actual authority to drive the program and to coordinate with the rest of IT, that program's not really going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I've seen that as well. It's challenging. It's really challenging. You do need the executive buy-in from above. It does need to come down and filter down. It's challenging depending on who you assign as the program manager. It really does depend on who that person is. They need to be passionate about the Mac platform, and they really need to know and understand why they're doing it. And it's really the combination of, I think, those factors. And yeah, it helps if they do have a bit of decision-making ability. Yeah. Cool. I think that's it. Yeah. Everyone good? Well, thank you very much. Thank you.